Hey, my name is Brent here on Cloudy with a Chance Meeples. Welcome to Ideas. Welcome to an episode of Fresh Ideas with a fresh new designer. Cole Smith is joining us, and I am a believer that community is built on conversation, much like games are built on ideas. And that's what this whole podcast is all about, this interview section where I interview designers or illustrators or publishers in the board gaming hobby and find out how they got their ideas from just ideas to the games that we love. And I said that we have fresh new ideas because we have Cole Smith, who I have to say is a fellow Canadian, and a newer designer. Would I
Mhm.
be correct in saying that, Cole?
Yeah, I got into seriously game designing and pitching over kind of COVID, which I think prompted a lot of people to get into having a lot of spare time
Right.
to try some new stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we get to that, I love talking backstories. And so I don't know why they call backstories, but it's kind of backstories. How did you get into this hobby that we share that is the board gaming hobby?
Yeah. So for me, I always tell people that a big influence was my grandparents.
Hmm.
And when I was younger, me and my siblings and my cousins staying over there, my grandparents would always have a big closet full of games. And they were big card game players, cribbage, euchre, all rummy, all of those. So they taught me a million card games,
Mm-hmm.
and they also just had so many games that they would pick up at yard sales. So they would teach me games, and or me and my cousin would just learn a new game that they just left laying around. And um, I didn't realize until I was older that other friends didn't grow up playing a lot of games with their parents or their grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it was normal when my grandma bought Stratego that we read the rule book
Mm.
together and that she attacked my bomb. And I went, "Oh, I blew up your general. Like, sucks to be you," to my grandma. And other people didn't do that with their grandma. So definitely, I've been playing games since I was very little. And that definitely kept me pushed me then later into, what we know as in the board game hobby as displayed behind you with so many modern games.
Right. Did you have a favorite game growing up? Like
Uh,
whether with your siblings or with your grandparents?
yeah, I had lots of favorite ones, but one I can share about because it was one that my grandparents had and we played it a lot at their place. And it's one that not a lot of people have heard about. It's called Easy Money. And it's a really interesting, cool game. It's typical like roll and move, but there's only one pawn. And it's a big money symbol. And you go around a circle, and wherever you stop, there's always a mini game, but it's not just for you. Everybody gets to be involved, and they're
Okay.
always like a gambling type mini game. And there's these giant wads of cash that are wrapped in a little uh, whatever it is, tape thing. And
Okay.
so it all sits in the middle, and you play all these games where you go, I'm going to risk this and roll these dice, and everybody can win something. And it was just I don't know. It was a really unique, interesting game. It kind of felt like a Mario Party. Like
Hmm.
every round, everyone's playing all these different games, and so it's definitely one to people should look up on Board Game Geek. I'm sure it has an entry, but it's a little older.
Easy money. I'm writing it down right now because that's one of the things I love talking to other designers and just others that are in the hobby, like finding out what their favorite games are or what do they enjoy playing because the catalog of games is so vast. And yeah, I might have, a decent collection, but there's tons of games that I've never even heard of. That
Hmm.
might be your favorite game, right? And then you share that with me and I find out about it and I'm like, hey, this is a really sweet game. And it's just kind of like that cascade and that snowball effect of learning new games. And
Hmm.
so easy money. I'm gonna check that out. I actually, you said play cribbage. I played cribbage for the first time this year.
Oh, nice.
It was on my bucket list to play in 2024, and that didn't happen. And I played it early this year, and I was like, oh, okay,
Mhm. See,
this is
that's kind of like part of my story is the interesting thing is finding out people. Cribbage is great, so everyone should play it, but finding out that there's people that haven't played until they were adults, and I was playing when I was like 7, so it's yeah, definitely been playing games for a long time.
I think my parents, thinking back, I believe we had a cribbage board, in kind of like one of these drawers of like random games. My dad had like Millborns and yeah,
Yep, I love
Cribbage,
that
and
game.
he had a few other games, Racco. So that's kind of the games that I played in my. I didn't play
Mhm.
Cribbage, obviously, but those are like my memories of games growing up. But I never played Crib until this year, and I didn't win. But you know what? That's all right. So what are you playing these days?
One I've been really excited about, and I asked my local game store to order it in for me, is The White Castle by DeVere.
Mm-hmm.
And if people haven't played it, it's like a kind of worker placement, but driven by these dice. It's a feudal Japanese themed game where you're taking dice from this bridge and assigning them to these different areas inside this famous castle and outside of it. And it's really unique because you only get like 9 turns.
Mm,
And so you're really tight on turns. So to use a whole turn to get resources is tough because you need to get out samurai and these diplomats and these farmers to their special locations. And if you don't get out enough, you're not going to score well. So
mm,
it's one of those games where you really got to think, can I put out a farmer and do I have enough to pay for the ability that he's going to do at the garden that will let me put out a samurai this turn that will let me then also gain a few
mm,
resources back? Because if I use one turn to build up resources and one turn to spend them all without getting a little bit extra here and there with being crafty, then you're going to be too slow. So it's a really tight game, and it's doing really well. I just saw a post. It just made it into the top 100 actually.
wow.
I think it's like 99. At least it was yesterday when I checked.
Hmm. And that would be. I've heard of White Castle. It's a newer game. I think it was like 2024 release, maybe
I think
2023.
so. Yeah, only a year or so. Because it's part of a lineup. They did the Red Cathedral, which was
Mm,
based on like building a famous cathedral in Russia, and so the White Castle is based off a famous castle in Japan.
hmm. Right on. So let's dive into game design. What got you into game design? What made you be like, hey, you know what? I'm a creative guy. I got some wit to me. I can design board games.
Hmm. Yeah, so kind of connecting to the original story about growing up with my family playing a lot. Like if me and my cousin were at my grandparents just playing one of their games by ourselves, if it was a game we had played a million times, I would start to like make up rules and change stuff and say like, let's play it this way. And
Mm,
so I was already doing that when I was young. I remember I had some friends that were into like Warhammer and stuff like that, the tabletop miniature games, and I had a Lord of the Rings Risk game in
mm,
our family, and I would also like have friends over and we would take the pieces and the territories and we would kind of make up our own area control even before I really knew, obviously risk is area control, but before I
right.
really knew those terms, I was kind of saying like, let's give them these abilities, these units. Let's make your
Mm,
guys start in this region, and and then if you take over this region, you get this benefit. So before I knew that people actually made the games that I was playing from a young age, I was elementary school, like making up my own rules. And I think um, like my day job is a graphic designer, and
okay.
I got into that because I've always been into art. My mom is a painter and she was an interior designer. So I kind of grew up with a lot of creativity and art around me. And I think
Hmm.
to me, it just made sense to take something I liked, like a favorite game, and
Yeah.
then try to do my own thing with it.
Hmm. So your Tanuki came out last year.
Yep.
That was your first design. That's
Hmm.
a card game with published by Synapses, right?
Yep. Synapses Games is out of Montreal, Canada, and it's a quick take that game about Japanese raccoon dogs that are dressed up as samurai and ninja and stuff like that. That
You
came
know,
out, yeah, last year.
I have full respect on Take That games. They are not for me. Uh,
Fair enough.
as you see King of Tokyo behind me, King of Tokyo to me is just it's a different type, but
Yeah.
lots of people like it. I'm not one that would go for games typically would Take That. I don't mind interaction in my games, but whatever. That's just it. It is what it is. But you have two games coming out Kickstarter later this year. Um, and we're going to speak on a couple of them, both of them. That's actually what Fable 2 is.
Yeah.
Anyways, Three Magi and Sauros. But I see behind you, you have the game, The Flood. And Three Magi is a biblically themed game
Hmm.
about the Three Magi.
Yep.
Um, what, how did you abstract that down? As a fellow believer, that is like a pinnacle story in the Christian faith. That and the crucifixion, obviously. But how did you go about such, I guess, a sensitive story, but a grandiose story in its own right?
Hmm. Yeah. So Three Magi will be coming to Game Found
Okay, game found.
probably in April, May, hopefully.
Okay.
Always hard to pin down when the publishers will officially launch, but um, but for your viewers, I co-designed that with Adrian Adamescu, who is the designer of Sagrada,
Hmm.
and he is also a Christian. And we got connected online and talking about co-designing, and he really wanted to make a biblical themed game, and I thought that was a great idea. So we had brainstormed some ideas, looked into the few things that have been done before, and somehow we came across the story of the three wise men journeying to Bethlehem to see the birth of Jesus. And like you said, it is a very abstract theme, and it didn't initially click in my brain. But one of the first key things we thought about was obviously people love like conversion in games and crafting, and it's a pretty basic mechanic of crafting an item or something for points. And so we thought if you collect like the gold, frankincense, myrrh, like those kind of spices and precious stones that are listed in some of the biblical accounts that the wise men brought,
Hmm.
and then you kind of spend those to craft a gift. So you're kind of compiling those precious items or resources into a gift, then you're eventually bringing. That can kind of be a point value because there's definitely like that was kind of what started, and we had this idea that they travel from a really far land. Possibly they traveled on camels or with other Middle Eastern animals or caravan or something like that. So we had an idea of a modular board that uses tiles that you're
Okay.
moving across. And one thing that's fun is there's a lot of games that have a module setup, which I love, shuffle all the game tiles and build the map. But to keep it accurate, we started the Three Magi in Arabia, and they're moving across different locations on the way to Bethlehem that,
Mm.
you go through Jericho and you go through Jerusalem, but they're laid out in the order they would be on a map. And then the rest of the tiles are kind of just generic desert surrounding it. So I think that's kind of where we started, and we wanted this journey to feel like you're always moving forward towards something. And along the way, you meet other merchants. And then we had a pretty good prototype. And one of the coolest things I'm excited about is Adrian is a big fan of rondels,
Okay.
and he created the navigation board, which makes you like when you play cards from your hand, they have sun, moon, and star symbols, and those will progress these tracker tokens that are going in circles around this navigation board that represents the sky and the
Mm.
constellations as the three magi were, following the Star of Bethlehem. So somehow it fell together with some of the key thematic points, and it worked out well in a way that feels like it's really telling a story. And it can definitely be hard to make a biblical themed game with competition because it might seem like, oh, if people are like telling the story of God's journey and his promise to his people, like, why is there competition between
Mm.
players? But it's uh it's one of those games that's a bit more kind of like something like Wingspan where it's like you're building an engine and you're doing it like you're playing with people, but you're doing it mainly yourself. So
Hmm.
Three Magi plays a bit like that. You're not really blocking anyone. There's some movement restrictions amongst yourself, so it's challenging, but it's not like you're kicking over the other wise men. You know what I mean? It fits thematically with the story.
There's no area control with the wise men, is what you're saying.
No,
Right on.
yeah.
You talking about that, and with the rondelle and the the navigation of the stars. It just sounds like a fun puzzle to wrap your mind around, mixed with its worker placement. Am I correct?
Yep. Hmm.
And worker placement over the last number of years, I've come to realize is like my favorite game mechanic.
Hmm.
I don't know what it is about it. It's just well, Everdell is my favorite game. Um, and that obviously it's worker placement. I don't know if you've played it or not, but
Yep.
it's there's just something about whether it's critters or just whatever your resources are or dice or whatever it is, putting out and gaining stuff. And so I know I love worker placement, so I'm excited to
Hmm.
see this. Obviously the theme speaks to me quite well. And a lot, I should say. That's the word I'm thinking of. It speaks to me. And so I'm pumped to see this game. And hopefully it will be potentially out like 2025, like fall, like
The goal is because obviously, a lot of people, even non-Christians, associate the birth of Jesus with, the nativity story. So they think about it at Christmas time.
mhm,
So I believe, obviously, I'm not in control of everything. It's up to
absolutely.
the
Yep.
publisher, but the hope is that we can run it, April, May, and then backers can get their game for around Christmas time this
Okay.
year.
Well, let's hope that happens. And so that's your one big project for this year.
Mhm.
Um, I should actually back up. When did you start that design? Like how long has this design been in the works?
I'm trying to remember. Let me do some math in my head. I believe it was April of 2023 that me and Adrian started designing.
Hmm.
And, we went through some different ideas and then we got to the prototype, and that one moved pretty quickly. And I think it just worked out well because there's probably not too many publishers that are specifically looking for a biblical themed game, but we had Bedouin games in mind, or Bedouin, however you say it. And
Yeah.
um, it just happened that they were looking for games and it fit really well. So it's I'm trying to remember exactly now that I've just been working with them for a long time, but I guess I'm still doing work with them. So the initial thing started in maybe seriously in the summer of 2023, and so it's been about a year and a half.
I think that's wild because all these games behind me and the games I see you have arcs and a root and
Mhm.
games behind you. Um, the amount of work and like how long it takes for things to come out is, I think, sometimes surprising to some people
Mhm.
that they go buy a game and like, oh man, this is a fresh new game, but then you don't know the journey that the designers went on, or the designer, the publisher. It could have been 2, 3, 4, 5 years before it hits the market. And I find that the journey is a lot of fun. And
Mhm.
hearing the journey from you, like what you went through, is why I love this segment here on Cloudy, because I can hear how ideas don't just stay there; they come into the games that we love. So another game, Sauros, you have that one with Tangerine Games. Let's dive right Tangerine Games.
Yeah. They've already, yeah. So Soros is a trick-taking tile game. So instead of playing cards as your hand, you're getting these thick mahjong tiles. It's got a dinosaur theme. And then as you win tricks, you're taking your tiles and adding them to these asymmetric player boards that represent each dinosaur in the game. And you have to line up the tiles in correct ways where, like, one of the simple scoring is if you have four of the same type of dinosaur all touching each other, you get a bunch of points. But
Okay.
each tile also has a symbol. So there's eggs, bones, footprints, teeth, and you're trying to, some you want isolated, some you need in a pair, but they have to be a pair. If there's a third one beside it, it doesn't score. The eggs you want just the most on your player board out of all the other players, and you get a bonus. And before I rant about it more, let me quickly, I actually have a prototype and
Let
I'm
me see
allowed
it.
to show this.
Let me see it.
I actually just got it in the other day because
Mm,
for viewers, Sauros will be on Kickstarter hopefully around April.
nice.
Now, the artwork that's on the Kickstarter preview page is slightly different because things change and they already had these in the works printing and shipping a long time ago. But
Hmm.
I can even show you some of the like this is the Bronchiosaurus, I think. So
Oh,
that's how
Stitch
you line them
Edge,
all
man.
up.
So
Yeah,
okay. So you have what, two, four, six, eight, nine. So you can only win 9 tricks. Like, is that how short the game is?
not exactly. So you play um you play multiple rounds depending
Okay.
on player count, but each round you have 7 tiles.
Okay.
And as I'm talking, I'll try to show off some cool tiles.
Nice.
But as you play, the one of the most interesting things in my design for this one was trick taking's been done a million times, and I wanted to think about I love trick taking. It's simple, but if you want it to work nowadays, you got to do something different. So
Right.
my first big thing that I love about the game is you have your hand, everyone draws their hand, and instead of in euchre flipping over a spade and saying trump suited spades
Right.
for the whole
Yep.
round, what you do is you flip over one of the tiles, and if it's the yellow dinosaur, trump is yellow. And we play. I lead with blue. You have to follow if you have blue. If you don't, you know what? You can play trump and take it. You always get, if you win, you get the tile you played, and then you have the choice of taking the center tile as well, that was the trump one, or
Okay.
somebody else's. So if you win and you take my tile, then I get the trump one. But then the next round, you get to lead again and you flip up a new tile. So
Okay.
it's not yellow for the whole round. You could flip up a second yellow and it's yellow again, but you could have flipped up a purple. So the suit of the trump changes every time. So there's a bit of randomness in you can't really predict a whole round like you can in euchre sometimes.
Hmm. And so you're trying to get specific like combinations and scoring in that regard with the like on the player map.
Yeah, so one sec. Let me show you the T-Rex one. So you'll see the little white outline to where the tiles go.
Yep.
And your first tile can go anywhere.
Okay.
And then you have to play off of that one.
Okay.
And there's a multiplier, like I said, for you got 3 yellows, it's 3 points. You get a fourth yellow and they're all connected. Now it's 5 points. The ag ones I said is you want the most out of every player to score a bunch of points. The bones only score if they're touching eggs, so they score for each egg they're touching.
Okay.
The footprints are the ones that I said had to be in pairs, two beside each other. And then the teeth are always 1 point, but if you can leave it isolated, it's actually two. And there's some special tiles in there, but one fun thing that we worked on in development is it's probably really hard to see on your camera, but there's a little
Hmm.
-2 points in this section.
Yep.
It's the reserve, and you can put one of your tiles sideways there, and you can play it later. I won't go into all the rules, but there's a restriction to
Okay.
how many you can play. So you can put it there and then hopefully optimize it later. But if you get stuck at the end of the round with tiles there, you lose extra points.
Hmm.
And also, like you pointed out, how the maps looked really small to you. If you do win every trick, you're going to have a bunch of excess tiles that are going to score you negative points.
Okay. Kind of, I guess, similar to that, like the Azul. Like
Mhm.
you take too many things, they fall to the floor, and then they're minus
Yeah,
points.
that'd be a good example. Yeah.
Hmm. Right on. That's fantastic. I'm excited about that because I'm not the biggest fan of trick taking games. I am. Um, I have. I'm looking at my second game shelf here. Uh, I have like Skull King, which is a super punishing trick taking game. I don't know if you know Skull King.
I've heard of it. I haven't played it.
It's yeah, like four suit. One is always the Jolly Roger. The black cards are always trump suit, and play 10 rounds. in round one, you get one card. In round 10, you get 10 cards.
Okay.
But at the beginning of the round, you have to bet how many tricks you're going to win.
Oh,
And
that's similar to Wizard, right? Have you played Wizard?
yeah, it would be similar. I haven't played Wizard, but I know. But in Skull King, if you bet wrong, like you get minus points. So it's
Yeah.
like you have to get bang on. I think there's a variant where you can still get points even if you like you can play it not as punishing. I have that
Okay.
one, and then Inside Job is a trick taking cooperative trick taking game with a trader,
I've played
um,
that one. Yeah, that one's fun.
which is a blast. And so my wife really likes trick taking games, and she loves Thailand games. So I'm thinking
Yeah.
she's going to be intrigued in that one for sure. But as we wrap up, got a few minutes left. Besides these two big games that are coming out this year, and obviously Tanuki, which came out last year, share what you can and what you're allowed to with publishers and whatnot. Like, what are you working on these days?
Yeah, I do. I can't really share too much, but I do have another signed game.
Mhm.
I'll just say with one of the publishers I've worked with before. So just
Cool.
in case people like keep up to date and
Yeah, yeah.
see my name on another thing in the far future. But just myself, working on some designs. I have an interesting like Tetris style game, um, where the theme is like snake charmers. And so
Okay.
you're playing these notes on a flute board, drafting these snakes that are obviously all these different wacky shapes, and then you're putting them in a basket board. But the interesting thing about this one that's my favorite mechanic in it is unlike something like Isle of Cats, where um, you want a large family of green cats. So every time you get a green cat, put it beside your green cat to keep them
Right.
together. There's different colored snakes, but the snakes have a head where somewhere on its piece and it's facing one direction. It's got eyes and a tongue. And at the end of the game, you draw an imaginary line from each snake's face, and every snake that's the same color that it's looking at will score that 1 point.
Hmm.
So you want all your reds always looking at reds, but you don't have to put them in a clump. You could put reds on one side of the board and have them looking through other colors. And so
Right.
at the end, they're all looking different ways. And there's other stuff to the game, but that's kind of the fun twist on the Tetris style.
Polyomino.
Yeah, I always forget that word. So I just say Tetris because that's what that's what I see in my head.
Right. Right on. Well, you know what? This has been fantastic. Um, you got a lot of ideas, and obviously three of them have come into fruition into games. And so I'm excited to see what you come up with in the years to come. So if someone wants to kind of follow along your journey, um, about whether what you're playing or what you're designing, are you on social media that you're posting things and kind of like sharing some of these things that you're working through?
Hmm. Yeah, so the main place I share is just on Instagram,
Okay.
and my handle is Cole underscore designs underscore games. And I share about what I'm playing, but I also post, like I just posted about this prototype that I got in, and I post a lot of images of, crappily cut cards
Mm,
drawn with pen as I've been making my prototypes, and just kind of share a little bit here and there so people can see what I'm doing.
right on. Perfect. Well, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
No, this has been absolutely fantastic. It's my pleasure. And like I said at the beginning, I believe the community is built on conversation, just like games are built on ideas. And so check out Cole's Instagram, check out GameFound later this year for Three Magi, as well as Sauros coming up. And so once again, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
And that about does it for this episode. Until next time, my name is Brent. Grab your umbrella. The forecast is cloudy with a chance of meeples.